Tell me what this is about. Who are you?
Former university professor Frances Widdowson took this live stream. She says she was targeted for her views on Canada's residential schools by a satirical prank show funded in part by CBC Entertainment, an arm of the public broadcaster.
Expose me.
For the CBC to participate in that, I think is disgraceful.
Welcome to the Political Orphans. My name is Nico Lagan. My guest tonight was arrested, pranked, and silenced for her views on the alleged Kamloops residential school mass graves. Frances Widdowson, thank you very much for joining us once again.
Thanks for having me on.
This is as good as an intro as I have for you. Arrested, pranked, silenced, because you have the audacity to question the narrative.
Yeah, I think pranked is not the right word for what happened in Vancouver. I think these were humiliation rituals that were being lived out, or revenge fantasies maybe that were being enacted in Vancouver. Because I still don't understand why they think this would be funny, what they did. So I think it's humiliation. That's what they were trying to get up to.
You want to explain to us exactly what happened? Because from what I can gather, they approached you like any other show / news station would approach you, as in, we're working on something. We think you'd be the perfect candidate to come speak. Everything was paid. You were flown, you were dined, you were fed, you were where you stayed was paid for. So all expenses paid.
That's correct.
And,
yep.
Yeah, go ahead. And then you show up on the set and...
So I was approached in March, and it was, as you say, it was, they said all sorts of nice things, that they really appreciated my viewpoints, and they said all the things that I was interested in. So it was, basically flattery. This is kind of the tactic. They said that I'd be flown there. I would be put up in a hotel. I'd get $1,000 honorarium for doing it, and it sounded like a good thing. It was a docu-series. That's what they were saying it was. They were going to do a series of episodes on Johnny MacDonald and the idea of trying to make a more objective history. And then free speech. They were very interested in free speech and its connection to being able to speak freely at universities, which is a major area of my interest. When I arrived at the studio, first of all, I had a driver that was driving me, and I to be honest, I didn't even know where I was going. I was very trusting, and now I look back on it, that's kind of a dangerous kind of scenario that was happening. So I arrived at this studio. I was met with two people, Mike Smith, guy who called himself Mike Smith, who turned out to be Igor Vamos, one of the members of the Yes Men, and Amy Mercer, who's connected to production in the United Kingdom, and she was British. And something was a bit odd because they were very excessively friendly and kind of smarmy. It was odd. They were acting. They brought me into kind of a lounge area. They put makeup on. They were chatting to me endlessly. And then they said, we're going to go in, and there's going to be a Johnny MacDonald actor. He's going to kind of give the side of the theatrical portrayal of Johnny MacDonald, the difficulties, I guess, of portraying John and A. MacDonald in this day and age. And so I thought that was a bit strange to have that at the same time as doing an academic interview for a documentary. But I thought it would be interesting kind of juxtaposition. And so we went in. The woman who was giving the interview, who called herself Becky, looked very odd. She had a blonde wig on and was very, very made up, and looked and acted kind of ditzy, which I thought was a strange thing happening for an academic interview. She interviewed me for, it was at least half an hour, might have even been an hour. It was very softball questions. She didn't have any knowledge of the subject area, which was odd. The Johnny MacDonald character wasn't talking at all about his role as an actor. he was just kind of agreeing with certain things that I said. And after about a half an hour, maybe longer, two Aboriginal men walked in and dumped a bag of shoes, children's shoes, onto the coffee table in front of me. And I was quite shocked by this. And I thought they were sabotaging the interview. That was my first thought. They were the next guests who found out I was there and they were going to kind of interrupt the interview. But then I realized that Becky, what's it called? Becky, she's actually a comedian from Saskatchewan, an Aboriginal comedian whose name is Dakota Ray Hebert. She was looking at me with intense hatred. And so I was kind of trying to talk to these two Aboriginal men saying, why are you putting these shoes on the table? What do you mean by this? Are you trying to make a comparison to the Holocaust? Is this what, because the Holocaust memorials? And they wouldn't talk to me. They just glared at me. And then I looked at Becky and asked her what this was about. And she was staring at me with hatred, as I said, and I just stared back at her. So we had these long kind of stares. And then I realized I didn't have my phone with me and I really wanted to capture what was going on. So I didn't want to leave the room where my bag was, because then I wouldn't be able to get back in and take footage of the scene. So I said, I need to take my medications right now. Could someone please bring me my bag so I can take my medications? And so they brought me my bag. And when they brought me my bag, I whipped out my smartphone and started up the live stream, and then began interrogating who called himself Mike Smith, but his name was, as I said, Igor Vamos. And I said initially, this appears to be a setup where people are going to try to paint me as a racist and post this on social media. And he said on camera, you figured it out. That's what this is about. So that's what they're doing. That's what they're going to do if this ever sees the light of day. That's not funny. That's not a prank. That's a humiliation and setup and trying to show someone to be something they're actually not. So the whole thing is a massive embarrassment. And it turns out, we found out after the fact when I started talking to a whole bunch of people about this, that it's actually a CBC and APTN backed program.
I didn't think I would ask you this question, but to me, it sounds that they couldn't have picked a better person to do it to.
Mm-hmm.
In hindsight, right? If I had to choose someone, I'm really happy it happened to you, because you had great instincts to just take your cell phone. Plus, you're used to this.
Yep,
you're used to being debated. You're used to being hated on. So just like me, if they do that to me, they regret it, because I would welcome this type of format. In hindsight, are you happy it happened to you?
I'm not unhappy. It's a bit alarming to have that sort of manipulation happen to you. But in the end, it's exposed a lot of things that wouldn't have been exposed otherwise. And, I know some people now, a lot of people who've had this happen, and there's certain personalities where, there's been people who've been seriously psychologically damaged by what went on. And that wouldn't happen to me at all. So it doesn't bother me one bit to have this kind of thing happen. And it just makes me more determined to fight harder against this absolute breakdown of principles that we used to take for granted that are very, very important in a democratic society.
What I like is exactly that, is they picked the wrong person. You are welcoming it, it seems like. You're going to expose it, and I will do everything I can to help you do that. Mm-hmm. And I almost hope that it's published. I hope that they do publish it so that we can actually see how ridiculous they are.
Yeah, I hope so too. I don't hope so for some of the other people. Like, that's what I'm afraid of is, this is the RCMP officers, the retired RCMP officers. And we haven't got to the bottom of this. I've spoken to two of them. I'm hoping to speak to more. I don't know how many, if there were plants, it's possible that some of them were plants, but two of them were definitely for real. And what happened there is unbelievable with RCM, and one of them, they appear, and I don't know this for sure, but I talked to them this morning. They appear to use the RCMP infrastructure to put out a call to see if any retired RCMP officers would like to participate in a documentary about what happens after you retire in the RCMP. So that's what it was billed as, to be talking to these retired RCMP officers. One person, a woman, very nice woman, has nothing to do with Aboriginal people or anything. They lured her to Vancouver, convinced her to wear her uniform, and a couple people were convinced to do this. And that, I think that's a very serious thing, because when you wear the RCMP uniform, it's like you're on duty. It's not a casual thing. And they put these RCMP officers on a stage in front of an audience. Had, in one case, had two Aboriginal men, the same Aboriginal men, I assume, who dumped the shoes out onto the table, had them, and they had headdresses on, the two Aboriginal men. And in the one instance, not with her, but with the other one, there's 2 days, March 25th and March 26th, these Aboriginal people were castigating the RCMP and saying how horrible the RCMP were and everything. And these RCMP guys are sitting there listening to this. They were expecting to be honored at this ceremony. They were told there was going to be a very important dignitary there, and then they were told it was going to be Prince William. And then they had a screen with King Charles talking. They couldn't see it very well. It was probably AI generated. And King Charles said that the RCMP was going to be dissolved. And the RCMP officers are listening to this going, what? The RCMP is going to be dissolved? And then they had Prince William come out, but Prince William, quote unquote, Prince William was an actor who didn't look like Prince William. So everyone's going, this doesn't really look like Prince William. In one episode, he had a mace, and a mace is the symbol of authority in Parliament. It's carried by the Speaker. And so the Aboriginal guy with the headdress traded the headdress for the mace in this one episode. Anyway, yeah.
That's I don't understand the whole point of this. That's the part I don't get. Why did they involve RCMP agents? I understand you. Like, don't get me wrong. I understand why they would target somebody like you. I get it.
I understand too.
That to me, that to me makes sense. But why would they go after the RCMP, and especially retired? So they're smart enough not to go after people that are on duty still. But by what you said, and correct me if I misunderstood you, but you mentioned that they would have used somehow the internal organization of the RCMP in order to get there. So presumably there's people on the inside that are aware or help them get retired RCMP agents or officers, should I say. But that part, I don't understand why they would do this, but I know from the research I've done that Lindsay Shepherd was also set up exactly like you were.
Much worse. It was much worse for Lindsay as well. So I got off relatively lightly from the whole thing because it wasn't a long period of time. Most of my communications with these people, Forge, this made up company called Forge Media, was just about my travel arrangements. I didn't have they didn't come to my home and interview me in my home, which they did with the RCMP, retired RCMP officers and Lindsay Shepherd. When they come to your home and learn your children's names and get Lindsay, they got her banking information, all this kind of stuff. Anyway, Lindsay, they created a fake historical figurine company about making dolls out of historical figures. They used up a lot of her time got her to be a consultant on a supposed doll that they were developing, you know, and the person I talked to this morning, there's two different people and they had slightly different stories. But the one I talked to this morning, you know, she was really excited about the whole thing because she thought this would be part of her maybe helping people to understand what it's like to be a retired RCMP officer. She's been destroyed. Like she has serious psychological problems because of what happened now. Like this is really serious stuff. But Lindsay was looking forward to maybe having future opportunities, doing something with the doll, all these kinds of things. So it's not just that they waste your time and do all this stuff when you could have been doing something else. It's what you think is going to happen in the future because of your participation in this kind of whatever that was going on. For me, I was happy to get a trip to Vancouver. I was happy to be paid $1,000. You know, I know that's not going to do very much for my legal action, but you know, the CBC is a public institution. So any lawsuit where you're suing the CBC, that's going to be the public funds that are going to be up on the block there. So, you know, I didn't suffer. Like I'm happy, you know, going along, and I'm really angry for what they have done to other people, to vulnerable people. I'm not vulnerable, but other people are, and they really did a number on very vulnerable people, and that is disgraceful what they did.
And that's the difference, because as I said earlier, if they did that to me, I would laugh. I would laugh very hard. I would take my cell phone out and I'd make you famous. This is what I do. I would absolutely welcome the opportunity. But as you said, there's people that didn't deserve that. They weren't in the public eye like you are, like I choose to be.
Yeah.
I also heard that they did the same thing. They tried to do that with Dallas Brody.
Mm-hmm.
They tried to do this with Jeremy Emmerich. And they also tried to get...
They did do it with him.
They actually, they got him on the show?
Yes.
And I think they tried to do the same thing with Conservative MP Aaron Gunn.
They did, yeah. So the two politicians, and Jonathan Kay, the editor of Quillette, Aaron Gunn, and Dallas Brody, like they're much more, you know, aware of these kinds of things. So like I'm not thinking that this is what's going to happen. As long as I've got a recording of the episode, which unfortunately I'm kicking myself because I don't know why I did not bring my handheld recorder, which I use all the time for just to make sure I have a record of what I said. You know, it's not even, anyway, for some reason I didn't do that. I'm amazed. But if I have the recording, I don't care. Set me up. I'm going to take the recording and I'm going to show what kinds of, you know, slime balls you guys are with your cutting and your changing things around and trying to make me look in a certain way. So, you know, I'm not even really that interested in trying to do deep dives into my people want to talk to me and find out who they are, because I'm not a politician. So it doesn't really make my image. I don't really care about my image. Like, whatever, it doesn't matter.
That's why I've suggested this to many people that are in the limelight now, to always have somebody with them recording.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's off their cell phone, even if they're just sitting there with a cell phone recording the whole thing, at least you have proof of what happened. And they tend to, if somebody would tell you, oh, you can't record here, why? Right there, you know that you're getting set up. Something is off. If they don't want you to record, something is off.
Exactly.
But Dallas Brody was saying that I saw the post that she published after she saw your post. She reposted it on X, and she basically said that the reason she knew it was something was fishy is because she used to work at CBC and she knows how they approach guests, and it's just this is off. There's something very, very off about this. But I want you to tell me what you think about the statement made by Chuck Thompson, the head of public affairs for CBC, where he said that CBC News and APTN News have no involvements in this production, and that satirical prank shows are a long-established television format used by broadcasters.
Yeah. Yeah, there's two issues there. One is, it is true that there is the news people don't really talk to the people who do entertainment, like they're two separate kinds of things. But the bottom line is CBC, as a publicly funded broadcasting corporation, is responsible for what happened there. So they're just trying to protect their news side from being, seen like it's illegitimate or disreputable. But really, it's the management of CBC, and I think that they should be subjected to some humiliation rituals. All those executives in the CBC, let them see how they like that, to have things happen. Have some kind of struggle session where they're going to have to bow their heads and be apologetic and all these kinds of things. The second thing, which is the satirical prank show, this is not what this is. This is Aboriginal neo-tribal elites. So we got to separate out the Aboriginal leadership from the regular Aboriginal people, because this is not about ordinary Aboriginal people. They probably are horrified by this happening. Acting out their revenge fantasies, their resentments against people that they perceive to hold power over them in society. That's what they're doing. And the RCMP, you're asking questions about why the RCMP. It's like everyone who works for the RCMP, in their view, is just people who deserve to be humiliated for the terrible things that they claim that the RCMP has done. And, the RCMP, the history of the RCMP and Aboriginal people obviously is a complicated one, but, there's many RCMP officers who do their hardest to try to bring, a system of equality under the law to these unbelievably dysfunctional Aboriginal communities. And, to work in an Aboriginal community as a non-Aboriginal RCMP officer is not a fun job to do that. And that's kind of what's going on here. So it's not funny. It's not satire. It's not a prank thing going on. There's no lightheartedness about it, like Candid Camera and all these kinds of, where everyone just kind of laughs afterwards. It's like, we hate you and we're going to humiliate you. And we're going to do everything to make this whole thing as unpleasant as we can for you. And for some people, one person in particular, their life has been destroyed. And that is just an absolute outrage.
I would go even further, because I'm a big fan of words, right? I always look at how people say things, and I never underestimate people. And if you listen to what he said, it's very clever what they did, because he said CBC News and APTN News have no involvement in this production, which is accurate. CBC Entertainment does. So they're literally protecting CBC News, but the truth is that the organization funded or partly funded this production, but they're saying not CBC News.
Yeah.
But it was CBC Entertainment, yet they are under the same umbrella, the same crown corporation that is CBC, that receives $1.4 billion of our tax money every year. And if you start looking also, the show's production, which is NLT1, also got funded by Indigenous Screen Office, which also receives public funding. In 2024, there was an announcement saying they would receive $65 million over 5 years and $13 million a year afterwards. That's all taxpayers' money. So is it true that satire, prank show have been used by television format and broadcasters? 100,000%. But how many of them were funded by taxpayers' money to ridicule somebody for their political views? Because we know that if I somehow was able to put my hands on public money, did a satire show targeting the woke left and doing what they did to you, there would be an outrage. There would be an absolute outrage. my funding would be pulled. People would probably look to have me arrested. But because it happened to you, it's okay. You know what? Whatever. They're defending themselves by literally lying. Well, technically, no, they're not lying. Saying CBC News is not involved is not lying. You're manipulating the truth. But you're not quite lying.
And it's the issue is CBC, not whether it's CBC News or CBC Entertainment. No. CBC, as you say, publicly funded public broadcaster. It is supposed to be serving the public. It's funded by Canadian Heritage, the CBC. It's about trying to, protect Canadian heritage. All the truth and reconciliation kind of language that goes on about this, that this is somehow going to bring about truth and reconciliation by targeting people like myself who are trying to speak the truth but are being canceled constantly, can't even go onto a university campus to have a coffee with the member of a public because they say that people feel unsafe with my presence being there and they've got to haul me out in handcuffs. That's the kind of person that they're trying to take on here for truth and reconciliation purposes. This whole thing is absurd. And it really needs a massive, examination. Like we have elements within the CBC, the most important office being the Ombudsman's office, but really the Minister of Canadian Heritage has got to step up here. And what I would really like to see is all the footage that they took released to see what went on in all these various scenarios. I'm a little bit nervous because I'm worried about these retired RCMP officers because they're not used to this kind of these kinds of tactics. So, like one of these RCMP officers is there's certain things he said that now he wishes he didn't say because you're not used to this kind of gotcha kind of style. So it's a bit worrisome, that sort of thing. But yeah, I hope they produce they're not. I don't think they will because I think there's too many eyes on it now that it'll just be another massive embarrassment. The other thing is it's going to be just judging by what CBC does with its current quote unquote entertainment. It's really, really lame and just painful, and it's painful to watch what they do. So it's not even going to be a good kind of prank show. It's going to be a lame. I don't even know. I can't even imagine what it's going to be like. It's just going to be horrible. So
I'm still curious to see what it would look like because at the end of the day, we need to remember that CBC is not just funded by taxpayers' money. The only reason they still exist is that we fund 75% of their budget. They cannot survive without public funds. Yet they're spending our money on this type of show. Because I don't have a problem with satire show.
No,
if you prank me,
if you
prank me, you get me, you prank me, that one's on me. It's on me, but you're going to pay a price because I'm not going to be an easy target. But at the same time, if you're a private entity, do what you want. It's your money. But I wouldn't be okay if that money was spent humiliating people I don't agree with. Do you know what I mean? Like the fact that I don't agree with you politically doesn't mean that it's okay for taxpayers' money to humiliate you. That's the problem that I have, is that it's not private money. This is our money that we're talking about. 1.4 billion to have a state-sponsored public broadcaster, and I'm air quoting here, public broadcaster, more the propaganda arm of the liberal machine. And this just shows you how much more proof do we need to show you that they're not about news. They're not about reporting the truth. They're about this type of crap entertainment.
And the other thing too, there's a couple things. One is usually these prank shows, in order for them to work properly, and that's the Yes Man was doing this. These two guys, Vamos and the other, I can't remember the other guy's name. I haven't seen any of their stuff, but I know they were doing things like going after Wall Street, and going after people that have power in society, these sorts of things. But, people like Jerry Amernick and myself and Lindsay Shepherd and this poor RCMP officer, they're not, the people who have power. They're trying to, they're either living their lives in a very non-controversial way, or they're trying to speak the truth that's not being represented. Which brings me to the second point, is that the CBC, although it platforms all these people like Leah Gazan, who wants to criminalize residential school denialism, same with Kimberly Murray, Sean Carlton and Negon Sinclair, who are, totally supportive of the attempts to state that Canada's a genocidal country and so on, which I don't think there's much evidence for. They will never, they interviewed me once in 2023. That was the last time they have interviewed me. They will never interview anyone who has a critical position on this kind of dominant, approach to the residential school. So instead of having the debates, which they should be having as a public broadcaster, they're having these humiliation rituals to make it so that they think that I will be less likely to speak out in the future. Well, they've got another thing coming. It's gonna. If you think I haven't been speaking out publicly so far, it's going to be 24/7. And the CBC, I am got my sights on you. You and the University of Lethbridge. You are the two biggest disgraces right now in these different, the media side and the university side. And so look out, because you're going to get it.
Before we do get to Lethbridge, because that's definitely something I wanted to address with you.
Yeah.
Have you spoken to a lawyer? If I can ask a question about what CBC sponsored programming is done?
Yes, I have spoken to a criminal lawyer. He thinks it's criminal.
I think so too.
That you're lured. So I was taken there under false pretenses, which is part of the criminal code. If you are, it's like sexual assault. Like if someone doesn't tell someone they've got a venereal disease when they're having sex with them, that's sexual assault because you did not consent to have sex. It's the same thing as when someone takes you somewhere and takes you somewhere under false pretenses. That is part of luring and this kind of aspect of the criminal code. So it is likely criminal what they've done. So we'll see, but my biggest problem with the legal side is if you go down the legal route, which I have done numerous times with these universities, the kind of machinery takes over and you start getting into all the procedural matters when it's not procedurals. That's the issue here. It is the fact that we have media companies, public broadcasting media companies to boot, not doing their jobs properly, which is objective journalism, fact-based journalism. They're not doing that. They are been captured by equity, diversity, and inclusion ideology, and they see their role as putting forward the perspective of people that they perceive are oppressed, and that is just completely destroying the quality of journalism in Canada.
And that's why if such a public broadcaster was to still exist, which I don't believe it should, I think it should be, if you cannot live off your own funding, the funding that you're raising through ads, for example, you shouldn't be alive at all. So CBC shouldn't exist, but if they did, it should be stuck to reporting. That's it. They shouldn't be doing anything else. Reporting, plain and simple.
But that's where I would disagree. So I would disagree. I'm actually a supporter of CBC. I was a big supporter of them for years until they became, terribly, just compromised. But I believe that there is a role for public broadcasting, but it's got to be it can't be this kind of wide open thing. They do certain things, or they did, and CBC actually has a very distinguished history. It's kind of started to disintegrate 20 years ago, where they did good documentaries, good kind of investigations. They sort of could do the things that, those that were trying to earn a profit might not take a chance on, because, you always have to be thinking about the bottom line when you're profit making as well. There's certain problems with profit-based media in that You have to be concerned about your ad revenues and, who's going to criticize the major advertisers on television. So there is a role for CBC to play, in my view, and I think they did play this role very well historically, but they have become a completely compromised and corrupted organization, and that needs a massive overhaul. And hopefully this is going to be something that is going to be part of the thing that does happen, where that gets changed.
Don't take this the wrong way, but the only people that thinks the way you do are all above 40. I'm 44, and I remember CBC when I was a kid. I remember Radio Canada, the French portion. I would listen to the cartoon in the morning, right? Back when the channel actually started. Remember, it closed at night and it opened in the morning, and you were listening with your breakfast.
Yeah.
But that's long gone, right? I have an emotional attachment to CBC because I grew up watching their programming when it wasn't the woke agenda on TV. That is not what it is today.
No.
But I hope that you guys form kind of a class action and sue them, because that means that those videos would have to see the light of day.
Yeah. That's the other good thing about legal action I should mention, which would make me pursue it just for that.
Yep.
Is you get production, and you can get and you have to get the emails, right? So all the communications, who was responsible. So that alone, hey, I'm on, sign me up for the lawsuit, not because I've been damaged personally, but because it was wrong. It was completely wrong what happened. And, people like Lindsay Shepherd should be just get seriously compensated for what they did to her, wasting her time and getting her to think that, she might get some opportunity, something might work out for her in the future, that kind of thing. This woman who's been psychologically damaged, all that sort of stuff. And unfortunately, sometimes, the only thing that makes people pay attention is, having to pay serious damages to people. So that's the other kind of maybe a benefit, but certainly production. I'd love to see the production that would come out of that.
I'd also like to see anybody that put their name to approve any type of approval process get exposed, questioned, under oath, and then fired immediately. No questions about it. No pension, no nothing. You're done. You're just done. Bye-bye.
Yeah. It's incompetence, massive incompetence. That is.
I think you're being too polite.
Unfit for office. Like, that's the thing, because cancellation, right? Like, they're not being canceled because of their views.
No.
They're being canceled because they're not fit to run a corporation like a public corporation like the CBC. They've done what they've done. Like, some of these people are seriously, it's like they're psychopaths or something to be doing this, like to be treating people in this way. It is quite shocking, like I'm anyway, these people on all these, the Aboriginal organizations. The other thing, someone has done a deep dive into all these organizations that were funded by this Indigenous Screen Office or whatever it is. Like, there's like the $6.3 million went out for 2024, 2025. Nothing has been produced from this. Like, it's just all been just thrown around, all this money. And we just got the budget. We just found out what the budget was for this Counting Coup. That's the other thing people might not know about. The name of this show is called Counting Coup, which is a Native American Plains saying for going and humiliating and intimidating your enemy so that they can't attack you, right? Like, that's how they're seeing it. So that's another disturbing thing, is that, like, I am not the enemy of Aboriginal people. I am trying to expose the Aboriginal industry, which is the lawyers and the consultants who are diverting funds away from the marginalized Aboriginal population that desperately needs the high quality services that they're not getting. So all of these productions that are being funded, no one cares. That's the thing. No one watches these shows because they're so bad. So no one cares whether they get produced or not. So instead of funding these ridiculous, cringy, lame productions, which many of them never get produced anyway, take that money and put it into trying to improve the conditions in Aboriginal communities.
Counting coup. Coup means hit or blow in French. So I knew what this was, but you're absolutely right. It originates from the French word coup, blow or strike, the practice of involved getting close to an opponent and touching them with a hand or a bow. But it's basically, in Aboriginal terms, humiliation.
Yep.
Because it shames the opponent without spilling blood. It was frequently seen as a way to gain strategic dominance and humiliate the enemy tribe.
Yep.
That's the name of our show, sponsored by public funding.
Yeah. Does this sound like Truth and Reconciliation? This kind of language? Like, this is kind of the issue where here we are trying to have these programs that improve relations between Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal people. This is just a complete disaster from the beginning to the end. There's nothing positive about it at all. It just is unbelievable that someone in CBC decided that this would be a good thing for them to be involved in. And APTN, Aboriginal People's Television Network, that's another one that completely exists because of public funds. They've done this elaborate scheme getting, like, you have to carry that show. You have to carry that network on the cable. Like, no one wants to have it, but you're forced to have it. And then that's going to be an elaborate subsidization scheme.
Whoever pays for cable pays something like 38 cents to APTN. So it's not, I was looking at it in preparation for this show. It's not publicly funded the way CBC is, but instead, if you buy a cable package, they automatically get 33 or 38 cents per subscriber, even though you might never listen to APTN. So they found a very intelligent way to fund their operation. There's another thing I wanted you to address, because on April 25th, last month, not even a month ago, you were arrested and issued a $600 trespassing ticket by the Lethbridge police while sitting at the University of Lethbridge cafeteria, having a quiet conversation and coffee with a student. Explain to us what happened.
Yeah, so I was there on February 4th, 2026, so a couple 4 months ago. Tony Hall, who was a professor emeritus, had invited me to come, my husband and I, to come and listen to his talk. And we decided the next day to do this spectrum sheet epistemology method that is a way of looking at the evidence for various claims. And we were going to look at the claim whether the residential schools were genocidal. So the residential schools were genocidal. And Tony Hall thinks that there's evidence for this. So we disagree with one another on this claim. I thought it was going to be, because nothing had happened at the talk the night before, that everything was going to be completely calm and so on. So I invited my husband to come and be part of it. And Tony invited his wife. We go there, everything's fine. I'm having this discussion with a student, and the university sends out an email to all students and faculty saying a controversial figure is on campus and with views that are upsetting and disrespectful. So a bunch of these deranged students went on the hunt for me and found me, started causing massive disruption. They were trying to hurt us. It was unbelievable. We were assaulted. We had our property stolen. It was just complete, derangement. And Tony and I agreed that we were going to stay there for as long as it took till the students calmed down and we could have this conversation with them. That's what we planned. But of course, the police didn't want that to happen because they would have to be paid several hours overtime. So they hauled me out of the area. Tony was left by himself and was surrounded by an angry mob and was thrown outside, and everyone was, it was just unbelievable. And then Lethbridge, instead of saying, whoa, this was just completely terrible what happened, they congratulated the students. One administrator, Leroy Littlebear, congratulated the students for saying they did a fantastic job in neutralizing me. Those were his exact words. They held a smudging ceremony in the area I was in. to rid the area of negative energy. And so I said, you guys, the University of Lethbridge, you're going to do that. I'm coming back. I'm coming back down. And so I sent out a notice saying that I would be happy to meet with students for coffee at the Lethbridge thing. So I got a reply from someone who was claiming to be a student. It turned out they were a mole setting me up, relaying all my information to the administration. Anyway, when I contacted the University of Lethbridge saying to the administrators, I'm going to be at your campus having coffee with students. Why don't we have a coffee? And you can tell me your concerns. Then they informed me that I had a trespass notice from being abused and assaulted and having my eardrums, having drums. And they said I wasn't allowed to be on campus, but I came anyway. They said that it was because of I was being disruptive. That's why they were giving me the trespass notice. So that whole was illegitimate, completely illegitimate, that trespass notice. And then so when I went to meet, and it was actually a member of the public that wanted to talk to me. So I was sitting down with him, Edward, showing him my street epistemology method on the April 26th, I think it was. Security came up and said that, I had a trespass order and have to leave. And I said, you don't have to enforce that order. Like, you can do what Thompson Rivers University did, and they just hung back and saw what was watching to see if anything unsafe would happen. And he said, no, the higher authorities told me that I had to get this, you would have to be removed. And so then they called the police, and the police put me in handcuffs and put me in the paddy wagon and took me back to my car and gave me a $600 ticket. Yeah. So that is being fought by the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms. I should never have been given a trespass notice. All those students who were trying to hurt us and abused us and assaulted us, and they're the ones who were causing the disruption. Why did nothing happen to them? This kind of thing. So I've talked to the Minister of Advanced Education about this, and I said, at the very least, what I will accept is that the University of Lethbridge has to hold an event with me, Tony Hall, and Aaron Pete, who's the chief of the Hope Band, who's really interested in having these kinds of difficult conversations on university campuses. And the government can force them to do that. All it has to do is say it's going to withdraw funding if they don't do it. That's all it has to do. And the University of Lethbridge will change course in an instant. So we're waiting for the government to act to restore the University of Lethbridge to an academic institution, but we'll see what happens.
How do you feel, considering that you were a teacher, to see that that's the state of our publicly funded institutions? We're not talking about private colleges here. We're talking about, just like CBC, publicly funded institutions. So academia,
yep.
You have so-called news. How do you feel as someone that's just looking for the truth and dares to question the narrative that publicly funded institutions feel the need to humiliate you, to silence you, and to have you arrested for not agreeing with them?
It's very frightening. And we are heading on the path of a totalitarian society. These institutions are the first ones that go when this starts to happen. The ones where you're supposed to be pursuing the truth. You're supposed to be holding institutions to account through the pursuit of truth. And we have to be very, very worried about what's happening to these truth-telling organizations, their destruction, because it means that we will not be able to figure out what's going on. And it means the destruction of our society as a democratic society.
It's, if you know Marxist history, that is always what they do. Those are always the first step, is to indoctrinate our youth and use our academia to do so. And clearly that's what you can see the effect at Lethbridge. I think it also happened to you at the University of British Columbia in January, right? Where something like a protest of 1,000 people showed up against you.
Yes. And again, it was totally fomented by the administration. they plastered this Indian residential school history and ironically called Dialogue Center, which is where I was holding this discussion. They plastered this quote unquote Dialogue Center with orange shirts and slogans that were right out of 1984. Like they were just complete George Orwell, types of creations about, how we're seeking the truth and all these kinds of things, when, these universities are completely failing. And, I know people often think universities are just, sort of these intellectuals sitting around. That's not what universities, well, that's what they do that, but they also are very important institutions in terms of, the dissemination of knowledge, which is completely corroded now. The 215 claim being the obvious example, but all sorts of other things where we just have false information being disseminated. You have people being trained like professionals, lawyers, doctors, teachers. They're trained within universities. Now they're completely compromised in terms of their ability to have a merit-based approach to medicine or the law. And then finally, the authoritarianism is that, what comes to mind is Nazi Germany in the early 1930s, when Nazi Germany had the most advanced university system in the world in the early 1930s. Hitler went in there and took out all the professors who would be challenging him. And that's what allowed Nazi Germany to basically proceed along that path. So people have got to take this very seriously. And we are almost there. We're not there yet. We're not being disappeared in the middle of the night. But if we don't do something about this right now and fight hard, we will lose all of our institutions that protect us and prevent us from following a similar path.
I couldn't agree with you more. I'm somebody that talks about bills all the time. Bill C2, C8, C9, C12, C16, C22, C25. And it's absolutely insane what is happening to Canada right now. And we should have known as soon as the Socratic method was no longer the way to teach in university. We should have realized then and there that universities are not educating anymore, but they're indoctrinating. The whole point of universities were based on the Socratic method of questioning. You don't agree with me? Awesome. Let's sit down and figure out what's real, what's not, and have a hard conversation. That's what universities are supposed to be about.
Exactly. And it wasn't, 20 years ago, although they weren't perfect, they were still functioning, approximately in that vein. It's really was in the 2010s, that's really when you began to see the machinery being taken over by these equity, diversity, and inclusion offices, and then all these activist professors being hired, and all these problems. It's relatively recent, and if we could just kind of recognize the problem and then try to figure out how to solve it, then we might have a chance of restoring our academic institutions.
We have 5 minutes to go, and I wanted to give you the opportunity to speak about a documentary that you co-produced called Mass Grave, the Mass Grave narrative.
Yes.
I'm air quoting here.
Yes.
So what remains, exposing the Kamloops mass grave deceptions impact on Powell River. Tell us about it, because it's not out yet, if I'm not mistaken.
It is out there. That documentary was produced in 2025. It's currently on YouTube.
Okay.
And it's incredible, and it is the cinematographer Simon Hergott, who is a very, very talented guy. He did the cinematography. He did help me with the direction and so on. He was the major kind of force, and we have done a great deal of footage over the last year looking at the GPR, specifically about the excavations that should be taking place at Kamloops right now. The documentary's had some difficulties just in terms of various, I don't want to go into it, but I have the footage and a lot of it edited. It just needs to be reworked to some extent, and we're hoping to release that September 30th, 2026 for the hopefully never to happen again National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, which is not about National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. But we also have on May 27th an event that we're going to be holding on the lawn of the BC legislature discussing the Kamloops claim, the 5th anniversary of the Kamloops claim, which is going to also have some footage shot to be part of that documentary, which is coming out in September 2026. So everyone's invited to come there. It's between 12 and 2 on May 27th, which is exactly 5 years after the Kamloops Indian Band made the false claim that the remains of 215 children had been confirmed at the former Kamloops Indian Residential School, which was not true. They received $12.1 million to do the excavations on that site. They just took the money and didn't do the excavations. And so we must have a reckoning about the Kamloops case. If we can't have truth about Kamloops, we're not going to be able to have truth about anything.
And I hope you guys include that portion of the live you recorded, because that's directly connected to this whole sham of reconciliation. So hopefully that's just good footage for the documentary.
Yes, it just happens all the time. Like it never ends. All the footage that is becoming available.
Did you have something you wanted to say in ending? You have literally 2.5 minutes. If you have something you want to plug out there. Yes,
and I think the author, I'm a big fan of the author George Orwell. And George Orwell.
Right there. See this? The eye there, the all-seeing eye. That's his whole collection. My wife bought it for me years ago. I love George Orwell.
I know.
But I don't love him. I love him, but I don't love him either. Like.
Anyway, George Orwell has a lot of things to say about this situation. And just before his death, he said some very, very prescient things. Because he said, I think the famous quote was that, if we don't do something about this, it's going to be totalitarianism, which is imagine a boot stamping on a human face forever. And those kinds of scenarios, which, we really don't want to live in a world that's like that. And just before he died, in his final warning for mankind, he said, what can we do about this nightmarish situation? And he said, the answer is actually quite simple. Don't let it happen. It depends on you. And I thought that's a very fitting kind of thing to think about, is that we all have the ability to stop this from taking place. But in order to do that, we have to act. And that's what we got to think about, is how can we organize and try to stop this emerging totalitarianism from going further and, taking away all of our democratic protections that we used to take for granted.
I'll add that when I first read 1984, probably 2 decades ago, I always wondered how they got to where they were, because George Orwell doesn't talk about it in 1984, how they became what they became. You have an idea, but now that we're living it right now, this is it. What we're seeing right now is the precursor to 1984. This is not science fiction anymore. What he imagined, he was way ahead of his time, but the time we're living right now is the warning time. This is, we still have the power to stop it, but it is what leads to 1984 if we do not act.
Exactly.
I'm going to call you France, because France is how your name is pronounced in French. So France, thank you very much for being here. Thank you for doing what you do. Thank you for laughing about it, because they couldn't have picked a better person to do it to. Keep on trucking, as they're saying, and I'm looking forward to having you on again.
Okay, thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Absolutely. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.